Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host whose brain is currently roasting on a skillet. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
What's this thing? Oh, it's a microphone.
Matt, do you smell that? Do you smell the cooking brain?
That smells delicious.
This week on the show, our series Deconstructing the Films of Ridley Scott continues with the director's 12th film. We're going to be talking all about 2001's Hannibal, the sequel, sort of, to the 1991 film Silence of the Lambs. Then we're going to be taking a look at last month's Doof Canon vote on Everything Everywhere All at Once. And finally, we're going to try to get to the bottom of whatever the hell is happening at Warner Brothers and HBO and Discovery and all that wonderful news of the week. How's that sound, Matt?
That sounds like a full slate.
It does. And because it is so full, we're going to get right into it. Let's talk all about Ridley Scott's Hannibal. Matt, what is this movie all about?
Living in exile, Dr. Hannibal Lecter tries to reconnect with now disgraced FBI agent Clarice Starling and finds himself a target for revenge from a powerful victim.
This movie was written by David Mamet and Steve Zalian. It is based on the novel by Thomas Harris and, of course, was directed by Ridley Scott. It stars Anthony Hopkins, Julianne Moore, Gary Oldman. It's a movie, definitely. I'm really curious, Matt. So I think we should let the audience know. Some people might know this, but I believe you are like pretty into this whole series of stories, right? I think you've read all the Thomas Harris books.
No, I haven't read them.
You haven't? I could have sworn you read all the books.
I mean, you could have guessed that from the fact that I was obsessed with the movies and probably talked about them a lot and probably knew all of the differences between the books and the movies due to like studying Wikipedia in detail. But no, I had not actually read the books themselves.
Okay.
But it is fair to say that I am weirdly obsessed with this franchise.
Yeah, which is weird that we can call it that. But I mean, technically between this movie, between Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon is the other one, right?
And Hannibal Rising.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, I forgot about that movie. Did you ever see the television show Hannibal?
No,
As someone who's obsessed with the series, it seems like something you should have watched, Matt.
I guess I'm not all that obsessed. No, I've never seen the television show Hannibal.
All right, Matt, I need to know what you thought of Hannibal on this viewing of yours.
Yeah, so I've definitely seen this movie a couple times before, and I think in the past I did not love it. I liked it a lot more this time, and I think this was one of those days where, for whatever reason, I was just open-minded to what the movie was trying to do, and I wasn't particularly comparing it against Silence of the Lambs. I think that's the main problem with the movie is how not Silence of the Lambs it is. And Silence of the Lambs is one of the best movies ever. And this movie is pretty shaggy and probably has too many acts. But I enjoyed it, and I particularly like the first hour, like the first half of the movie. I thought was pretty dialed in, and I think it kind of meanders and loses the plot a bit in the second half. But overall, I think I got a lot of good stuff to say about it, actually. But sounds like maybe you didn't have such a positive experience.
Yeah, Matt. In order to lose the plot, it would have to have one in the first place. No, I think I'm very conflicted about this movie because I think I agree with you that there are many good things to talk about. There's, Ridley Scott's usual fascinating directorial choices that I really enjoy. But also I did the thing that you're talking about, which is I could not help but continually to compare this movie to The Silence of the Lambs over and over and over again. And I just found it lacking in every way when compared to that original movie. I think there's a lot of things in here that are trying to capitalize on the popularity of Silence of the Lambs, but perhaps miss the point. I think, overall, I don't think this is a very good script. And I know we're going to sound like broken records when we're talking about Ridley Scott movies, but I just don't think this is a good script. And it's really weird to me that it's not a very good script because David Mamet is like a very prolific screenwriter. Like, I think he's Wag the Dog. What was the other thing David Mamet?
Did he do Wag the Dog? Really?
I think so, yeah. So like he's like a big time scriptwriter. And I just think this is kind of a messy movie. I think, Steve Zalian, we were talking about this right before we started recording, but Steve Zalian is also the writer of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the David Fincher movie that we reviewed a few years ago that we didn't particularly like. And a lot of the reasons we didn't particularly like that movie was because of the script and because of the way it was very clear to me that this was a novel that they just tried to pick up and drop into a movie, and that storytelling structure just doesn't work at all. And I think you did it again, Mr. Zalian. I think the same problem here is that I bet this would make a very good novel. All the different stories and different things we're exploring in this book. But like as a movie, I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like, what is the driving force of the plot going forward? It just seems like there's all these different people and they're just kind of hanging out on Earth, like trying to fuck with each other. And then it just ends. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Right. What was that? What was that?
That's, I mean, so like, there's definitely kind of three movies in this movie. There's the first hour, which is just everything in Florence, which is my favorite part, and it's kind of the most self-contained. I mean, it's a very simple story relative to everything else. It's like Hannibal's in hiding, Clarice is trying to find him. Okay, Mason Verger's also trying to find him, but we can almost just like put that in parentheses because it's not actually that important. And then there's a police detective who's kind of on to Hannibal, and he's kind of a complicated character. He's like desperate for money to try to take care of his young wife who's too demanding, and like there's some wonderful like tension as like, you're not sure if Hannibal's onto him, he's not sure if Hannibal's onto him. And the way that all evolves is like a great sort of tragedy. And Hannibal gets to be sort of creepy in like a distant way and scary in kind of an arm's length way, where it's not over the top. And then after that part ends, I agree with you. It's like, then we do the whole Mason Verger thing. And then we like rush, like just imagine like quarterback just sprinting to get the ball across the line, squeezing in this scene at the very end where Clarice is in the house with her former boss who is fed his own brain,
which is frustrating because that's, I think, one of the best scenes ever. Like the one thing I remembered about this movie going into it was the scene where Ray Liotta is standing there with his brain cap removed, just munching down on his own brain. Because it is such powerful imagery. Like, I can't believe this movie wasn't rated NC-17 for this guy being fed his own fucking brain. And I agree with you. I just wish here's what I think I'll say. I felt really disconnected from every single character in this movie. And I really wanted to blame that on the old adage I have, is that Ridley Scott is a robot and doesn't understand human emotions. I just felt really far removed from a lot of these characters. I feel like the story goes through the motions of explaining, what Clarice's motivation here is, what Ray Liotta's character's motivation is, what Patsy. I love that. I guess that was from the novel, right? That this guy's Probably. A descendant of the original Patsy, or Pazzi in Italian. Like, that's a fun idea. I just felt at a distance from every single one of them. And I think part of that was, to me, Matt, and again, I don't want to spend the whole episode comparing it to Silence of the Lambs, but one thing I thought of was when Lecter is talking to Clarice and kind of like, doing the thing where he continually asks her questions that are like really pointed questions that devour and get like right to the center of her soul, that type of thing he does. In Silence of the Lambs, I always felt like the most interesting part of that movie is he was exposing things about her that we, the audience, were seeing on the screen in her life, like the things that she was going through, the way she was treated, as the only female trainee in this very male dominated role. It just felt like again and again and again he was attacking the core of her, and the satisfaction of those scenes and sequences were, oh, I can see that. I can see why she would feel that way. I felt like in this movie, Lecter is just talking to Clarice a lot about herself, and I felt like none of that was dramatized in what Clarice is actually going through as a character in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt very separate to me. I felt like Lecter's talking a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just like none of it felt particularly relevant to the plot itself.
Yeah, the movie tries to tell us Clarice is having like a crisis of I don't know, loyalty, faith, something, a crisis regarding her career, because she finds that the FBI and the government is not really doing what's right, and she's kind of been screwed over by them, and she realizes that like that the lawmen cannot really be trusted to protect the weak, which is kind of her whole thing. We're told.
But does the movie actually?
Right?
Yeah, but does the movie actually show that, or is it just Lecter says that that's the way she's feeling?
Worse than Lecter saying it. Like for me, the worst line in the movie is toward the beginning when her boss is like I forget the exact exchange, but he's basically making the point that the crisis that she's going through doesn't matter because everything's going to be fine, and he's like, this changes nothing, and then and her response is, it changes everything. It changes me. And I'm like, first of all, like I get that, like
it's so overwritten.
Yeah. Like in stories you're allowed to be a little bit like dramatic, but that's just so like no human would ever say that in a million years. Right. And this isn't, the dialogue in Silence of the Lambs is super naturalistic and like, perfect. Even when Hannibal Lecter is being weird, it's still like something a human being might possibly say. But yeah, like this movie, it's just I agree. I agree with that. Like not dramatized successfully, and it's sort of like there is no real cohesion to it. Like this is a criticism of the novel as well that I've read, is like people just didn't buy Clarice's dramatic turnaround in the novel. In fact, I think no one will mind if I spoil the contents of the novel.
No, I don't think so.
So in the novel, like it doesn't end the same way. Like Clarice becomes Hannibal's lover, and they run off to Italy and are deeply and profoundly in love.
Man, see, I really felt like this movie wanted to do that, but it like was too afraid to go for it. Like totally. Again, it like walked up to the line and just it didn't go far enough to where you could actually read that in the subtext. Like obviously we're playing with that, and it doesn't. I think the movie would have been so much better if it committed to that idea, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a. I mean, I think most people didn't like that about the book anyway, because they're like, Clarice never would have done that. But you're like, it's like, okay, but in this movie, you did the whole movie as if she was going to do that, and then you didn't have her do that. So
right.
I mean, I still thought. I've always thought that the final moment was actually kind of awesome, where it's like you're sort of prepared to believe anything of Hannibal, that he would do anything, because he's just a monster, he's an animal, and there's kind of always this question of like, does he really care about Clarice, like in some way that we would think of as like human?
Is this morbid fascination, or is it something deeper or something else? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Is this a game for him that he just wants to break her and it amuses him? Or is she actually as important to him as he kind of claims? Yeah. And I love I love the fact that he cuts off his own hand to spare her. And because it's like, oh, like that's such a like he can't say anything better than that demonstration to show like, yeah, he always did. He is in love with her, actually. And part of what he's in love with is that she is this straight arrow, and she would never compromise, and she would so I did like that. Like again, like I say, I like a lot of what the movie's doing. I could talk a lot about the first half, and how the first half is almost totally distinct in this one sort of artistic thing that it does, where it's really, really hammering on the medieval angle. And it's like we're in Florence, we're surrounded by all these amazing statues and the architecture, and we're being pulled into this kind of mental space where Hannibal lives, which is basically the medieval mind, if you want to see it that way, where like hanging somebody from the ramparts is like a reasonable thing to do that happens all the time. And this is, in Hannibal's mind, disemboweling someone for betraying you is just like, yeah, of course you'd do that. Like that totally makes sense. Like these medievals totally make sense to me, and he finds it beautiful, and like you can see why he's attracted to it. and Ridley Scott does the Ridley Scott thing where he communicates that visually.
He shoots the shit out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you know if this was actually filmed in Florence? Because it was absolutely beautiful.
It looked like it to me, but I don't actually know. It's a good question. It says it was, they filmed in Florence. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I agree with that. I wish we could just carve this part out of the movie and make it the whole movie. It's one of those things. And again, I haven't read the book. I don't know what the book is. Obviously, Clarice is in the book, but it seems like one of those things where we like wanted to make just a Hannibal movie, and like we wanted to make this Hannibal versus Pazzi movie, but we needed the other big names in it, or we didn't think people would go see it, and so we needed to work all this other stuff into it. I obviously that's not true because it is based on a book that has Clarice in it, but a lot of times it felt like that to me because like I was really looking at it and I'm like the Mason Verger character, I don't know why we needed to have this in this story at all. Like, I don't know what Gary Oldman is doing in this character. I don't know why they chose to do it this way, because I think one thing you were telling me is that the character in the novel had plastic surgery to where he almost looked just like a normal person, right?
No, I know. Actually, what I was trying to say was that Hannibal had plastic surgery.
Oh,
so that he looked like a different person.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was one question I had, because when you're like wanted by everyone and just very casually in the middle of a giant European city, just being like, yeah, it's me. But I think to me that's part of like he wants to be caught, he wants to be found, like he wants these things.
Maybe, yeah. Like I think he does enjoy the chase of it all.
Okay, but yeah, with the Mason Verger character, I guess so here's my overall question to you, Matt. What is the theme of this movie? Like, what is this movie trying to communicate? And how do these three disparate stories that we're talking about, the Mason Verger character, the Pazzi character, and the Clarice character, how do these three characters and the way they interact with Hannibal cohese I think I just made up a word there, but into a story, like, and I think I'm asking you this question lawyerly, knowing the answer, which is I just don't think they do. I just like, I obviously all three of these are people that have had encounters with Hannibal, and want different things from him, but I just don't think it comes together in any kind of satisfying cohesive theme.
Well, I do have a suggestion of what the cohesive theme should be, but I'm going to preface it saying I don't really think this comes across at the dramatic level. It's just a thread that I notice when I stand back from it, which is self-destructive obsession, because you have Pazzi, Verger, Clarice, Hannibal. These are all people who they have somebody that they're infatuated / obsessed with obtaining in some way. In Verger's case, he's obsessed with obtaining Lecter so that he can torture and murder him. In Lecter's case, he's sort of obsessed with obtaining Clarice for his own complicated reasons. You could even look at the Ray Liotta character in a certain regard and see how each of these people actually destroys themselves by their obsession.
I like that a lot because I think the movie is very clear about Ray Liotta's obsession with Clarice. He definitely wants to obtain her. There's a lot of cool things Ridley Scott does with the camera in this movie. One of them is when we meet Ray Liotta's character, he does this thing where he suddenly just cuts to a close-up of Julianne Moore's thigh as she's sitting down at the table and just holds on that for like 2 seconds, making it clear that like Ray Liotta is very inappropriately ogling her, which I think slots in very nicely with her frustrations from the first movie.
Yeah. There is actually some connective tissue there, but it's made more of like the central conflict here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and then I don't know, like I bring the Pazzi character into it because I think he's more ruining his life to try to keep his wife happy. And the Hannibal thing is actually just sort of the instrument by which he destroys himself.
The means to an end.
But yeah, no, I think like and speaking for Hannibal, I mean, he doesn't actually, he cuts his hand off, which I guess is a sort of metaphor. That's like obsession and people who were chasing, like, because the whole movie is just like there's a fugitive, they're trying to catch him, so it's just it's a chase movie, and then it turns out that they kind of allow this idea of obsession and pursuit and so forth to
yeah.
so
It is a chase movie, but it's such a weird chase movie because of the way we establish the chase, which is just like slow rolling of these disparate characters who it's not clear exactly what they want and how. It's just so weird to me, Matt. The structure of this movie is so strange to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I want to roll back to something you were saying about the Mason Verger character, because I think that's like the crux of why the movie is weird, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Is because like that whole thread, like you said, it's probably something that works magnificently as a novel.
Yeah.
Like it seems like a novel where you can almost see it as it was written on the page, and like how kind of clever and Byzantine this plot was. But in a film, it becomes confusing and overly complex.
Well, yeah, because there are so many characters and so many plot lines, like the movie, I think to me just kind of not yada yada's over, but just is very quick with his underlying motivation, what actually happened to him, and what is driving him to, pay people to train pigs very specifically to eat this. Like
Yeah.
it's just, I just feel like we move over it very quickly, and then like I guess the only thing we're saying with it is what you said, is just that he takes this to so far that it destroys him, and I guess that's interesting on its own, but I don't know. It didn't feel like that story alone could not hold up the movie, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
that was just the story, if it was just Mason Verger and Clarice and Hannibal and that's it, I don't think we would have had any story at all, because he just wants revenge. He almost gets it, then he doesn't, and his assistant pushes him into a pig pit. The end.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that can be said about the movie, maybe in the movie's favor, depending on like your perspective, is it is really committed to just inundating you with really messed up shit constantly.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. This
and
movie goes for it.
it really does. I mean, Hannibal, rather, Silence of the Lambs has quite a lot of shocking kind of stinger images and really disturbing moments. But this movie, and I think the underlying book, that's like the whole point, is like, okay, we're gonna have these scenes that everybody's going to talk about, where there's just the idea of this is an ex-victim of Hannibal. Oh, it's somebody who he almost caught, but they got away. No, somebody who he paralyzed him and had him cut his face off and feed it to dogs, so he's disfigured, and he was a child molester. He's an unrepentant child molester. But he's like creepily religious on top of all of that, and it's like we're just layering on the like creepy, disgusting, like perversity of this guy, and like everything in the movie is kind of like that, where it's we're not just going to kill this guy, we're going to throw him off a balcony and cut his abdomen open so that he drops his intestines out. Like it's just
beautifully
over
recreating the death of his ancestor.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like I think about this a lot, because like when we covered Worm and we covered Stephen King, there's a lot of horrifying stuff that we cover, and I'm always kind of interested in my own reaction to it, because there's always like I'm sort of simultaneously fascinated and think it's kind of fun, and also think it's like repulsive at the same time, and I'm just so interested in the way that we as viewers and just human beings react to this kind of stuff, and especially a movie like this, where this is like the point of the movie.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, it's horrifying, and it's my favorite part of the movie. I think it's the part of the movie that works the most, is how this movie makes you feel when you get to those particular scenes. I think if you look at Silence of the Lambs, I think is a movie that tried to make you uncomfortable. It tried to make you feel powerless. It tried to put you in Clarice's point of view, both in her life and her job and her dealings with Hannibal. This is a movie that I think tries to make you horrified. And I mean, it sets that tone from the very beginning. I think watching Clarice shoot a mother in the chest when she's carrying her baby on a baby carrier across her stomach. And like, man, I know it wasn't a real baby in the thing, but the squib that they put on that woman is like an inch away from that baby's head. Like she was literally like, move her gun fraction of a percentage to the left, and she just blows the baby's head off too. And it's just like, that's a tone setting moment, right? That is a horrifying thing that is kind of telling you what you're in for the rest of the movie, because this is what we're going to do with our main character. She's going to start the movie killing a mother while she's holding her child. And I actually, like, one of the things that annoyed me about that opening scene is I think it gave her too much of an out. Like, I think I know what it's trying to do is showing her how she's frustrated by the politics and the failures of law enforcement in general. And so having the Washington Police Department people are the ones that fuck it up for her, and then she gets blamed for it. I understand why it did that, but I kind of wish that she just fucked it up. Like, I kind of wish that, like, it was just she fucked it up. She went when she wasn't supposed to, and she ended up getting a situation where it was either kill this woman or die herself. And that kind of, like, I think the movie wants that scene itself to cause her into the spiral that leads her back to Lecter and leads her to try to figure out what the hell she wants, and according to the book, into his arms. But I wish the movie put more blame on her, that it wasn't just her living with the guilt of having to shoot this woman. I don't know. Am I totally off base there?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that there's so little to kind of chew on when it comes to Clarice as a character. No pun intended.
I agree.
But like anything, I think giving her that kind of conflict where she feels more like she's actually the failure, because as it is, it's like she's kind of too perfect. I guess one way to say it is she has no arc, right?
I think she does. Yeah.
Like, that's the problem, actually.
What moment in this movie does she make a choice, right? Like I just feel like she's not making any decisions, really. She's just kind of going through the plot.
Well, she's always doing the Clarice Starling thing. Like in the beginning, the disaster with the shooting the woman is not her fault. Then when they take her badge and stuff, it's like, well, of course Clarice is going to still go after Lecter, even though they've taken her badge. This is totally in character. This is her, being a gunslinger. And then in the end, she doesn't go with Hannibal, right? So like, it's always the thing that you would expect her to do. It's not shocking. I think, this is just something I was thinking. It's not a major point, but like, I think my favorite moment with her, both the performance and the character, is like when Hannibal is cutting into the dude's brain, and like, she hates this guy. Like, she just loathes this guy. But like she's like weeping because of how horrifying, and it's kind of, it's like nobody deserves this, even this guy who like she hates him, but it's like, this is so horrible. And I just love that moment from her, because it's I don't know why exactly. I guess it's just a really well sold moment of humanity, while most of the time her character is not being particularly human.
And I love her insistence in that moment of like, I want some wine to drink, which is just like, she's just reaching for anything that will make him stop, right? Because she knows, like, just telling him stop doing that is not going to work. But like, can I please have a glass of wine, is just like, that's the type of thing Hannibal Lecter will stop what he's doing and actually fill up a glass of wine for her and give it to her. I agree with you. I love that scene. I guess this is maybe a good place to talk about Julianne Moore a little bit. I love her as an actress. I really do. I think she's phenomenal. Again, this is a case where the problem is I'm comparing her to Jodie Foster the entire time. And I just think they're doing very, very different things with this character. And I think I like Jodie Foster's version better. like, so Jodie Foster is doing this thing where she's the big thing they repeat over and over again in this movie, in case you ever forget it, is that one of Clarice's big insecurities is her family origins and where she came from, right? And being perceived as white trash. Like, this is something they said, I think, once in The Silence of the Lambs and roughly 12 times in this movie, just in case you ever forgot about it. And the thing I loved about Jodie Foster's performance in that movie is that she really didn't have much of a Southern draw until she really got like upset or heated or like really emotional, and then her true accent kind of spilled out of her a little bit. In this movie, Julianne Moore is just doing a muted Southern accent, and that's it, really. And like, that's not a huge problem in and of itself, but to me it just speaks more broadly to the how less complex the character is, that like, this is one huge signifier of what the type of person she was, and she is just infinitely less complex in this version. And like, I don't know if I want to blame Julianne Moore for that. I think at least part of that we have to put at the shoes of Sir Ridley Scott, right? He's directing her how to perform, but I just find it comparably a huge downgrade.
Yeah, like if you wanted to be generous, you could say that she's in a different point in her life, and she no longer sees the point of hiding her accent. But
yeah, it could be, but that doesn't seem like that's what the movie's trying to do.
It doesn't, because then why would everyone keep bringing up the white trash thing as if it's going to hurt her feelings? Because if she were just doing the accent freely, then that would mean that she doesn't care anymore about that.
Yeah.
And really, it's like, you don't buy that she cares about it. I think what you said about it, just not dramatizing things, I don't know what it is exactly, because I don't know if it's like a Ridley Scott thing. I hate to say this, because, we just did Gladiator, which is like one of my favorite movies ever. But like, this is a little bit more of the robot Ridley, where
it really is, man. Like that, I could not stop thinking of that.
Yeah, it's like, this is just not quite the way human beings behave. and it's close. It's like a really good android approximation of the way human beings behave, but you don't buy any of it at the you're always aware you're watching actors doing performances. I mean, that's actually, the funny thing is, like, everybody loves Anthony Hopkins, of course, but like, it's like when you see Darth Vader wearing like the costume, and it's like super polished, and you see it on like your HD television, you're like, oh, it's like, that's a man in a costume. It's like, the artifice for some reason like really pops.
Yeah,
and it's like, that's Anthony Hopkins playing Hannibal Lecter.
Yep, I'm 100% with you on this. I'm going to go further and say I think he's bad in this movie. I think this is, to me, this spoke so much of Anthony Hopkins listening to people talk about Hannibal Lecter's place in pop culture for a decade after he played the role originally, and then picking up the role again. And it's like hitting the beats of who Hannibal Lecter is, hitting the broad pop culture understanding of who Hannibal Lecter is, and making sure we're playing up those parts in particular. It feels like a caricature of Hannibal Lecter, somehow played by the same guy who played him the first time. And I just don't think it's very good at all. I think he loses all his subtlety. I think, the thing about Hannibal Lecter to me was, he's a monster, but also he's like he can be really charming at times, like, and like really, like, I don't want to say good, because that feels like a fucked up thing to say, but like, he can be kind and he can be considerate, and he's also this creepy monster at the same time, and that's the wonderful complexity of him.
Yeah,
and I just feel like we flattened all that down into this character in this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing about Silence of the Lambs is that he'd been in prison for like 15 years or something. And so we were seeing a version of the man who had become weird and isolated and twitchy. And, but like, seeing him, I really, giving some notes to Anthony Hopkins here, like you kind of wanted to see him when he's walking around Florence and interacting with people. You kind of want to see him behaving like just like a very charming, debonair man. And maybe he doesn't get to drop as many pithy comments about being hungry or whatever, which, you know, it's like after the ninth little snide aside, you're like, okay, I get it. He's being clever about the fact that he's a cannibal. It's very funny.
Mm-hmm.
No, but yeah, like, you know, the scene when he's talking to the detective's wife, you don't like that should be really, really charming, right? You should buy it as charming, but it just comes off as him continuing to be a creepy serial killer. So,
mm-hmm.
you know, I don't think it's like, so you know, you said you think he's bad. Like, it, to me, it's not like it was not like it was so jarring that it was like, oh, this movie's bad because of Anthony Hopkins' performance, but it does just not feel like the same character. Or I mean, I like the way you put it. It's a caricature of that character, and Agent Starling is sort of not a caricature, but like a more two-dimensional version of the Clarice Starling that we knew before. And I mean, I do think, you know, geez, you mentioned like, what is Gary Oldman doing? Like, Gary Oldman is just going for it here. This is this is like, what was his name? Zorg or something?
Zorg, I think.
Yeah. In the Fifth Element, where it's like, just have fun with it, man. Just be crazy, be a weirdo. And he does it, and it's like, it's fun in the way that Zorg is crazy, where you're like, no human being would behave this way, but it's sometimes fun to act to watch a performance of that kind. But in this case, it's like nobody's acting human, and so this extra weirdo, you're just like, everybody's weirdos. Every single person in this movie is a weird alien who I can't relate to or connect with in any way. Which, yeah.
I have to blame Ridley Scott for this, man, and I think, you know, we're 12 movies into this thing. I think we're about halfway, and I've gone back and forth on this. You know, we've had these episodes where I've been like, oh, I think my whole Ridley Scott is a robot that doesn't understand how to shoot human emotion in a believable way. I've watched movies that said, no, that's not fucking true. Look at Thelma and Louise. There's no way this man could make a movie like that. And then I come to this one, so I'm like, oh no, here it is again. I think it's so strange to me, because I think that's probably a big part of the reason why I feel so removed and far away from this movie emotionally. It's the type of thing where all the horrifying scenes disgust me appropriately, but like, not because of the characters, just because it's gross. Yeah, so I guess the question I have for you, Matt, is, what is it about Ridley Scott? What is it about his directorial style that does this? Because obviously the robot thing is a joke. Ridley Scott is a human being who understands what emotions are. Why do his movies feel like this at times?
There's definitely something stylistic that he does consistently, and it happens even in the movies that I actually think are genius, like Alien, for example, where you feel like a different director would make you empathize with the characters a little bit more, but there's always this coldness, sterility, distance. Even, and I don't really know what it is. Like, I think it might even be something with just like the way he composes shots, where he's so, this is a guess, okay, I don't know, but it's sometimes it feels like he's so preoccupied with making the shot beautiful that you remain at arm's length from the subject emotionally.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never thought of that way.
Like, here's an example. And the thing is, it's totally subjective, and so somebody could say, no, you're crazy, Matt, that's not how it works at all. But the scene when Maximus finally gets to his home and he sees his wife and son, you know, butchered and strung up, and Russell Crowe is doing nothing wrong, but the whole sequence is shot in a way that's like, it's not with Russell Crowe. We're watching Russell Crowe, and the whole thing is, like in contrast, you could imagine a different director shooting that whole sequence where the camera is locked on Russell Crowe's face, either in like a mid or even close up, probably mid because you wouldn't have enough play with a close up, but you see him react, and then you follow him as he walks up, and then maybe you only see his family's feet there when his face reaches them, right? And you're kind of following him on his little journey, and then the moment after that, which in that movie is like a cut, which actually kind of abruptly ends the moment.
Yeah.
So like, see what I'm saying? Like that should be the most emotionally devastating moment in that film. I don't know what the most emotionally devastating moment in this film should be, because frankly, we don't feel anything like that in this movie. Mm-hmm. We feel a lot of stuff, and none of it is like empathy.
Yeah.
But it's always shot in this way where it's like we're like a spider in a web, like watching our prey struggle, instead of actually being like with the characters in an immediate human sense. I would say the only exception to this is Thelma and Louise, and I think that's just because I think he actually does shoot those two actresses in a way where we're just sort of empathically connected to them more.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because there's only really like those two characters in the movie for most of the time. I've been talking a lot here. I don't have a lot of certainty in what I'm saying, but I feel that it has to be something to do with the way that he actually is physically constructing shots.
Yeah, I think you've just kind of unlocked something for me. I don't know. I probably need a little bit more time to consider this, but we talked at the very beginning of this whole project about one of the things Ridley Scott is most famous for are his, Ridleygrams, the fact that he composes and writes storyboards and draws storyboards for every single shot in his movie. Mm-hmm. Like, he's very meticulous in how he storyboards and develop those paintings. And so perhaps that is it. Perhaps, he is the type of director that is so much more interested in broad composition and storyboarding to make it an image that is beautiful and to his credit is frequently beautiful compositions, like beautiful photography, love it. But he is much less interested in the intimate emotionality of human drama, character to character, the moments of character to character, like just the moments of, you're absolutely right, sitting with a character as he experiences the worst possible thing in the world. Really being there, being in that frame, being intimate with that character as you're watching him experience those things. No, he's that's not necessarily the thing he's interested in. And so, I think you don't notice the lack of those sequences while you're watching a movie usually, but you just feel a little bit colder than you maybe normally would.
Yeah, that's again, I kind of feel horrible hammering on that moment in Gladiator, because like in one sense it is an amazingly effective moment, but part of me is like, couldn't it have been more effective?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I feel like the choice to like sort of dolly or maybe crane zoom like back away from him as he's experiencing this, and then the feet come into view, that is a super artistic, aesthetic shot.
Yeah.
That is nonetheless pulling you away from the emotional subject of the shot, which is Russell Crowe experiencing the loss.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the kind of thing where you can imagine him, getting really obsessed with how awesome this is going to look, and what a beautiful painting this image is going to be, and it is indeed. Like that's why I feel weird about it, because I'm like, it's an amazing sequence, but I think that I'm right that it is actually creating this sense of distance.
Yeah, no, I think you are right. And I think with that in mind, I kind of really am going to enjoy going through these next few movies and seeing the way that does or does not impact how I feel about these stories. Mm-hmm. I think we've been pretty negative overall on this movie. But I do want to just spend some time here at the end of our conversation talking about maybe some of the stuff that we really loved that we haven't quite gotten to yet, because we wanted this to be a better movie than it was, and we're kind of frustrated with the areas that we thought it was lacking. Because I really do think there are moments in this movie that I just genuinely enjoyed what it was doing. Again, like some of the tension sequences work really well on me. I think the whole thing with the pickpocketer trying to get his fingerprint is kind of like silly narratively, but like compositionally, I love that entire sequence.
Yeah.
And I love the way the sequence ends. I love the way the kid doesn't even realize he's been stabbed at first. He's like, he tried to get my balls, but I got it. I got it.
Yeah. No, it's fun actually. Like, like, so that's my main emotion while watching this extremely screwed up movie. Is that I was having a lot of fun. A lot of the stuff, there's a kind of competence porn angle that crops up when you're watching Hannibal Lecter do Hannibal Lecter things, where, you know, he's cleverly, you know, he's aware of the fact that somebody's trying to trap him, so he's outflanking them. He is the whole sequence where he like goes and steals the surgical tools is it's like, it's a pretty short sequence really, but it has all these moments of him like grabbing a doctor's coat and then closing the door of the freezer with the guy inside it, and like it's just a bunch of little funny moments and kind of fun creative choices to just show you like how scarily competent and like decisive and quick and smart he is.
Yeah,
like that's one of the most fun aspects of the franchise, if we're going to use that word, is Hannibal Lecter being, you know, crazy and a super genius, and that's fun. That's relatively unique.
I agree, although I will say that, like, I guess I want to see Hannibal Lecter like being a super genius, but I guess I don't want to see him like schlupping to the point where, like, oh, here he is getting some tools. Like, I want to see the execution of his wonderful plans. I don't know if I want to see like the elbow greased work that went into like making them work. I don't know. I think that removes a little bit of the mystique a little bit.
Yeah,
but I understand what you mean.
Well, you know, one funny thing, I guess this is going to sound a bit negative, but like, it's kind of funny how when he's been captured by Mason Verger, he kind of has this attitude of like unflappable confidence.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as you're watching it, you're like, oh, he probably has some plan to get out of this. No, he doesn't. Clarice just shows up and busts him out, and then he's able to kind of opportunistically, you know, make the right choices in that moment to come out with the upper hand. Yeah. But it's not because he had one over on Verger the whole time. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's great. I think, I guess the last thing I'll say here, and I know you're going to say positive stuff, but I keep thinking of things to say. I'm sorry. I think one of the reasons why Silence of the Lambs is so effective as a movie is because it fully understands that while Hannibal Lecter is a fascinating character to kind of study and explore and see performed on the screen, the movie still needs something to propel the plot forward. And I know he's instrumental in propelling the plot forward, but the story of Silence of the Lambs is Clarice Starling is trying to find Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. For some reason, I decided it was Buffalo Bob as I was talking. And I was like, no, that's not right. The movie is about Clarice Starling trying to find Buffalo Bill, right? Like, and I don't mean thematically. I mean just like the beat by beat moment of the plot. That is what the plot is. And Hannibal is there, and he's instrumental in that plot, but he is on the side a little bit. And this is a movie called Hannibal. So it's a movie that's supposed to be about Hannibal. And so we have to put Hannibal front and center. And I don't know, there's just something to me that you lose a little bit when you do that I think Hannibal works best in the role he was in Silence of the Lambs, when he's trying to guide Clarice and help her from the sideline. And we're seeing their reaction and their interaction with him. I don't know. I think he works better as a dude behind glass than he works as a dude wandering the streets of Florence. I just think like as a character, he works better there than out.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like that's all. Okay, so this is always a problem that I have with like a ton of stories, is when you have your villain set up to be magnificent mega genius, and then they still lose somehow. It's like, well, then almost uniformly that's because they have to make some kind of really unsatisfying mistake, right? Because in this movie he's like the antagonist. You could say he's the protagonist, but he's one of the antagonists. He's not the side character. He's not the sort of like facilitator, sort of complicated mentor figure that he is in Silence of the Lambs. He has to actually lose in this movie, and so you have to have basically you have a moment where he loses, even though he's been set up as being so fearsome, and it always feels there's always a little bit of a deflation when that happens. And really every story that tries to have like the super genius foe falls into this trap.
All right. So I think, Matt, the last thing to say about Hannibal, at least if we're following like the success and or failures of Ridley Scott's career, this movie was pretty successful. It made $351 million worldwide on an $87 million budget. That's profit. That's money. It's quite a bit of money, actually. Mm-hmm. You know, if you double the budget for marketing, that's still made, you know, double what they spent. So they're pretty happy with that movie. So if we look at this, like we now maybe start to get to see our boys picking up momentum a little bit. We were me a little bit more than you, but we were mixed on this movie. But guys got momentum, right? Gladiator, Hannibal.
Yeah.
I believe our next film is Black Hawk Down. I'm not sure how that does financially, but I think it's a pretty big hit.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty big hit. I mean, I think this is his string of really, really commercial movies. So
yeah. Really, and I think it's interesting because, like, I'm trying to remember what times were like in 2000 going forward. You know, I think he hits a stride where he's making the exact right kind of movies for the exact right kind of moment. You know.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, you know, he begins to kind of revisit things that he did before, but has a different take on. Like, you can view Black Hawk Down as another entry in his like military films, like sure. G.I. Jane.
Yeah.
Or you know, he keeps returning to the historical setting. He does Kingdom of Heaven, right?
Yeah.
Eventually he gets back around to science fiction, you know. So I think I'm just mentioning that because the latter half of his career, he actually sort of revisits some things he did in the first half of his career, which is, I think, going to be fun to compare and contrast.
Yeah, no, definitely. We will find out as we move forward, though. We'll be covering Black Hawk Down next. I haven't seen this movie since it came out. I think we went and saw this movie in the theater. I remember it being very stressful, but I also remember really liking it.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.